Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass. Thank you for watching this Ag Forecast, brought to you by Agrible, the makers of Morning Farm Report. Our software gives growers the insights to make the best decisions possible about their operations. Well, where we need to start this week is by looking at the last 7 days of accumulated precipitation valid through late in the evening on June 7th. For a big section of the Corn Belt, it has been just hit or miss showers and thunderstorms, and a lot of locations have been missed. So we've had a drier time period for the beginning of June right into this section of the Corn Belt. Now, there has been some good news for parts of the Corn Belt. For example, we've been discussing the drought that's been developing in the Dakotas. Well, the last 7 days, as we talked about, brought through the chance of showers and storms earlier on this week. Now, parts of the Dakotas were missed. Look at this section of North Dakota and this section of eastern South Dakota. But overall, this is at least better than nothing, although it certainly feels like it shut off as it went through South Dakota right as it went near the Missouri River. Wisconsin's been hammered as of late. A lot of precipitation in Wisconsin and some hit or miss showers in the northern parts of the growing region here in Minnesota. When you come down south, though, a ton of tropical moisture has been really dumped down here in the southern states. But again, right in through this section here, we've got to be watching the long-range forecast to see when our next chances of precipitation are coming through. Now, what I want to do next is I want to show you a satellite animation of the thunderstorms that we saw on Wednesday. Now, we had some pretty nasty weather move through parts of North Dakota. In fact, there were some tornado warnings in this section. But you see these storms blowing up here in the mountains? This is kind of neat to look at. We have what is called upslope flow. This is where we have winds coming out of the southeast, basically rising up on the front slopes of these mountains. That's triggering the lifting of the air into the atmosphere, where it expands, cools, taps into some unstable air aloft, and blows up into some pretty big thunderstorms. These are fantastically beautiful thunderstorms to watch if you live in these states. But why is this happening? The reason why we're seeing these storms blow up right here is because of the development of this ridge. Check out this next animation. Right now, off of the west coast, we have a pretty deep trough building into a broad ridge over the western United States and western Canada. Now, as that ridge builds, it helps to pull heat and moisture up from the south into this region. Now, if you've been in the eastern part of the Corn Belt, we have not felt that warmth for the last couple of days. We did have a warm weekend, but since then, a trough has developed over the east. And if you've noticed, you've had a pretty strong northerly wind over the last few days in parts of Iowa, Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, and that's helped keep temperatures cool. In fact, the days have been quite pleasant because of that. That northerly flow right in through here, but you need to see there is a ridge to the west, and as we've been talking about in the last couple updates, we are looking for some warmer temperatures spreading across most of the Corn Belt in the coming days. So let's take a look at what it looks like Saturday through Tuesday. The upper left-hand corner map shows us high temperatures projected through on Saturday the 10th. Look at this. As that ridge moves into the central part of the country, a big section here seeing better than 90-degree weather. In fact, we're going to see some pockets where we're going to be approaching 100 degrees. Now look at this. By Sunday, as the ridge moves here over the eastern half of the country, we see those 90s spreading into Iowa, spreading into Illinois, as they have already really kind of established themselves right here along the Great Plains. By Monday, Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, some pockets of 90s, where that ridge is continuing to move off to the east, still approaching mid to upper 90s in parts of Texas. And by Tuesday, widespread upper 80s and some pockets of 90s across a big section of the country. So this is just that warmth we've been discussing coming through in the models for the first and second week here of June. Now, I want you to be aware that on Saturday and Sunday, because we're going to be watching the development of a high pressure center kind of sitting over the southeast, the contrast between that high and this next trough that's coming in is going to be producing some pretty strong winds going through the center part of the country. And what you can see here is that those winds at times are going to be blowing maybe 30 plus miles an hour. So very, very windy through a big section of the Corn Belt stretching from Texas all the way into Wisconsin. But notice where the winds are converging, right in through here and right in through there. Those are locations that over the weekend we can be watching out for the development of some shower and thunderstorm activity. We'll show you that more in just a few moments. Now, what I want to do is do a quick analysis of the overall flow of the atmosphere for the next 10 days. So again, I've been showing you these animations. This is looking at the overall flow of the atmosphere. Now, what I see when I just kind of watch this in animation, just kind of blur my eyes and take a good look here, is that I see overall a pretty active wave train, and that's good. That means that overall we're resisting getting blocked up. When I say getting blocked up, I mean big ridges that sit in one place for a while, or big troughs that sit in one place for a while. But let's stop this at the beginning and kind of take a quick look at what we're expecting. All right, getting into Thursday morning, here we can see that ridge setting up here just to the east of the Rocky Mountains. That trough that brought in the cooler weather in the eastern Corn Belt is trying to move on off to the north and east. So here we go. We have this ridge here. Now that ridge exists because of this bigger trough setting up here over kind of the cooler waters in the Gulf of Alaska, just off of the Pacific Northwest coast. But watch, as we get into Friday and into Saturday, that ridge spreads out and kind of flattens a little bit as it goes into the center part of the country. That's the warmth that we're going to see. But the good news is that trough that's off the Pacific Northwest is going to move on shore, which means this ridge bringing in the heat doesn't stick around for too long. And what we see here is that by the time we get into Saturday and into Sunday and into Monday, look at that trough coming through. Now, right now, most models are agreeing that this trough is going to get here. But what I want you to be aware of is that as it comes through, this is going to be able to kick off a pretty sizable low pressure center going through the northern plains. Now, that's good if we're able to draw enough moisture to produce some precipitation in this area. What we need, though, is for this trough to drop rain across the primary Corn Belt, which is right in through here. And again, we're going to be watching for some southerly flow to help supply that system with some moisture to drop some rain in through here. We'll take a look at the total precipitation in just a few minutes. That trough exits, and we kind of see that things kind of wash out a bit as we get into next Friday. But I still see a pretty decently active wave train across the Pacific, which is good. I don't want to see things slowing down or getting blocked up anywhere near Greenland or anywhere in the Gulf of Alaska. So we'll keep an eye on this, but this is the overall pattern. So what about the next few days in terms of accumulated precipitation? Here's an animation by the GFS model. And what it just showed you is the total accumulated precipitation through next Saturday, the 17th. Let's watch it again. You can see a big section of the country getting through the weekend, right in through the center part of the country, stays relatively dry. We have a couple of weak systems moving through on Saturday and Sunday that could kick off some stronger showers and storms. Remember I showed you where that air was converging? Well, that's where you could get those stronger showers and storms in Minnesota and northern Wisconsin, maybe parts of Iowa. And look at this. That other region where the winds were converging, stronger storms setting up in the Central Plains. But as I continue to animate this, what I'm hoping is that as that system ejects into Montana and then eventually into the Dakotas, that we're going to see some precipitation coming into this area, spreading toward the south and east into the main Corn Belt. The GFS model's picking up on it. And what we see here is that by the time we get out into next Thursday, a week from when this video is released, Montana, plenty of rain. North Dakota getting some rain. Looks like South Dakota could be hit or miss, but we do see some precipitation forming here across the main part of the Corn Belt. Now, I don't give this forecast a ton of confidence, and that's because I still need to see the evolution of that trough feature, but at least it's an indicator of seeing some precipitation moving into this area. Now, we can check in on what the European model says as kind of another source of information. Look, they've got parts of the northern plains wet. Look at this, Wisconsin, Minnesota, parts of the Dakotas, Montana really looking wet here. But you can see that through June 17th, kind of hit or miss shower and thunderstorm activity for the center states here, for the I states at least. The good news is I'm not seeing, well, white in through here, which is what we've seen for the last several days. This indicates another round of showers and storms coming through to kind of wetten up that topsoil again as this corn and soybean crop is really growing fast. Now, I do need to talk about the long term, and this is important, so please give me your attention at the end of this video. We're looking at the long-range 32-day outlook by the ECMWF, the European model. And what we can see is that over that time period, it is picking up on a drier pattern. Now, the ECMWF is a pretty well-performing model. It does really, really well. But I don't necessarily think that this will be a completely dry period over that whole 32-day kind of outlook. What makes me think that we're going to see a little bit more precipitation than what it's suggesting is the active wave train pattern coming off the Pacific. Plus, if the ridges continue to develop out over the western part of the country. We could develop some ridge-riding thunderstorms that come through this part of the country, and that will be a lot of hit or miss rain, but it is at least rain, not a complete shutdown for 20 or 30 days of precipitation. So there's a lot of uncertainty, and I want to make sure that you hear that. There's a lot of uncertainty in this longer range forecast getting into the first week of July. So let's take a look at it in a different way. How about in terms of temperature? What we're going to watch here is a week-by-week animation of temperature anomalies. So this begins basically with this week and then goes out into the next week here. So what I want you to see here is that by the time we get into next week, look, where that ridge begins to spread, that's where we start to see the heat. As we continue, what the European model likes is that through the end of the month, it's going to try to carry, look, we're all the way at the beginning of July now, a slight warm bias for the Corn Belt. Now, this is the European model that we're looking at here. In fact, it stretches that warm bias out actually all the way through the first half of July. Now, remember, the farther you get away from when the model was initialized, the more uncertainty there is. But this is one of our better performing models, and it's picking up on a warmer pattern. Warm is good as long as we don't see sustained heat above 97 degrees. Really, we can't forecast that kind of accuracy months in advance. We'll have to keep you updated on the short-term forecast for any threat of those really high temperatures as we get into the crucial pollination period for corn at the beginning of July. I also want to show you what the US model is saying. So this is a model called the CFSV2. Starting again here in the week we're in currently, look, there's that ridge bringing in the warmth. Now, as I step forward here, what you're going to see is that as that ridge moves off, by that week number 2 here, we're still seeing the heat kind of over in this part of the country. As we move, though, the U.S. model is bringing some cooler weather from the northwest. It's going to try to have it spread through the northern plains as we get in toward the 3rd week in June. But as I continue to go forward here, here's that 3rd week, the cooler weather. You can see that the model by the end of June is trying to bring some warmer temperatures back in to the ice states and through here. And as we continue this out, now we're into the 1st week of July. In the 2nd week of July, you can see that before we get into the 3rd week of July, the 1st and 2nd week is showing the warmth again. So there is some agreement between the US and the European model. Where they disagree is once we get a little bit further into July. Notice that by the time we get into mid-July, the US model is calling for a pretty big trough feature coming through the middle part of the country, whereas the European model is not. And I'll be honest, it's too far out to show you any confidence. So what I want to do to wrap this up is I want you to read this with me, okay? It's what we know and what it means. What we do know is this. The Pacific branch of the jet stream has been very active for 6 months and has resisted blocking. Now that's good because persistence in the flow of the jet stream is an important factor when looking at long-range forecasts. For the next 10 days, we show a pretty active wave train. No Greenland blocking, no big permanent ridges setting up in the southeast. Remember, when they set up in the southeast, that tends to pump heat into the center part of the country. And the only region that we do have that's in drought right now is the Dakotas, although we're looking at potentially a little bit wetter pattern. The real stress this year has been on the planting, which was very rough for many with those really heavy early May and late April rains. Now, what does all this mean? Well, we will get stretches of drier weather in the Corn Belt. That's very typical of June and July. But the latest forecast updates suggest that there's a very low probability of these 20-plus day dry periods. You know, the corn and bean crops, they're fine for 10-day dry stretches as long as we don't see 100-degree heat, which right now we're not seeing too much of right now. But the key thing to be watching for is the position of that ridge. The further to the west it gets set up, the better for those ridge-riding thunderstorms coming through most of the states where we grow a lot of corn and soybeans. Now, just remember this, there is quite a bit of moisture that's in the soil that can be recycled when things heat up. So this means be on the lookout for a lot of hit or miss storms. I know having me go through this shows you that for the next probably 45 days, there's some uncertainty in the forecast, but that's the point. I want you to see what that uncertainty is and plan accordingly. Overall, I'm not seeing any major stresses through the next 30 to 45 days, but my confidence in that forecast is not especially high. I'll keep you updated very regularly on that short-term weather threat so that you know what to expect. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and wrap up this forecast video. We hope you look forward to Agrible's next Ag Forecast on Monday. To get Morning Farm Report for your operations, complete with a daily email that shows a snapshot of your field conditions each morning, go to morningfarmreport.com. Sign up for a free account. Full grower accounts are free if you sign up for our Sustainable Yield program or for growers who work with AD merchandisers. Thank you, and talk to you again on Monday.